Tonight, an apology rejected at a courthouse in London.
It would be a failure for anyone to believe that this was an apology.
What Nathaniel Veltman said at his sentencing hearing as a judge is set to decide whether his attack against the Afzaal family was an act of terrorism.
And now we're really going to be evidence-based to make sure that nobody's slipping through the cracks.
Plus, rewriting Ontario's kindergarten curriculum, how a new focus on reading can help detect learning difficulties in students earlier.
It's just everyone's vibe is very energetic.
And on your mark, get set, paint. Toronto's underground art battle you didn't even know you needed to see tonight. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll get to those stories in a moment, but we're starting this Tuesday evening with another significant day at the coroner's inquest into the death of Sammy Yatim, the former Toronto police officer who shot and killed the 18-year-old on an empty streetcar way back in 2013, testified again today as the inquest now moves into the final stages with the last witness expected to testify tomorrow. Stephanie Skandaris is tracking the inquest.
In a brief appearance this morning, James Frasillo answered questions mainly from the lawyer representing Sammy Yatim's mother. The focus of those questions mainly on his work and training prior to that night in July 2013 when he shot and killed Sammy Yatim. He was asked if anybody had ever told him to slow down, to be less brusque in his dealings with the public, to which he responded no. He was also asked about previous use of force instances where he had drawn his firearm in an incident or in relation to an arrest. Between April and December 2012, he'd had 5 use of force instances recorded, all of them documented as per protocol. But when asked, Frasillo said there was never a debrief or a conversation about any of those. They were never followed up on. He was also never asked, he said, about his mental health or his stress levels. Both of those conversations, he said, would have been beneficial. He also reflected on his training. He said it didn't exactly cover real-life scenarios, such as when officers arrive on a scene staggered, as happened on the night that Sammy Yatim was shot. When asked about his own recommendations, Frasillo said he believes officers should be trained on martial arts, in jiu-jitsu in particular. And recommendations are really the focus of this inquest. It's to make sure that something that happened to Sammy Yatim never happens again, and that officers are better equipped to deal with high-stress situations and people who are in crisis, as Sammy Yatim was on that night 10 years ago. Now, the inquest is still ongoing. Today, it also heard from the manager of the Toronto Police Service's Wellness Unit. Tomorrow, it will hear from the former deputy police chief, and it's expected to wrap up on Wednesday. Stephanie Skandaris, CBC News, Toronto.
Taking you to London now, where a courtroom was full for the third day of the sentencing hearing for the man who killed 4 members of a Muslim family in 2021. In November, 23-year-old Nathaniel Veltman was convicted of killing the Afzaal family with his truck while they were out for a walk. Today, the judge heard arguments on whether the attack amounted to an act of terrorism. The Crown said Veltman's racist and white nationalist views clearly fit the definition of an ideology, that he intended to instill fear in Muslim Canadians, and that sadly, he achieved that goal. Veltman's defense lawyer asked the judge to reject the terrorism arguments and to take Veltman's upbringing into account while deciding his sentence. Veltman himself addressed the court late this afternoon. He expressed regret and apologized to the Afzaal family. A family spokesperson had this reaction to those remarks.
It would be a failure for anyone to believe that this was an apology. It is one more strategy in a series of ploys that has not stopped for 2.5 years. It comes from a convicted killer who has had ample opportunity to confess. If he truly was sorry, we would never have been here for this needless trial.
He could have chosen any time to apologize, but to do it just before sentencing, so it can be entered into the record as an apology, is a checkbox that's being ticked for the parole board.
The judge is due to sentence Veltman and rule on the terrorism issue on February 22nd. To Oshawa now, and an active homicide investigation. Police say they've made an arrest, but are still searching for another suspect in connection to a killing that happened late last night. Ali Chiasson spent the day gathering details from authorities and neighbors in Oshawa.
Police were called to this house for a disturbance, but it soon became clear what actually happened was much worse. We got this witness video from a man who was parked at the plaza across the street at the time. It shows the chaotic scene when police arrived around 11:30 last night, and they found a man gravely injured out front.
A lot of police activity, a lot of yelling, police running to the house. They had a dog out.
EMS rushed the 62-year-old victim to hospital where he was pronounced dead. This witness also saw an arrest.
A young fellow was walking up the side of the road. The police had yelled for him to get onto the ground. They took him into custody immediately, took him away.
The man I spoke with didn't want to be identified, fearing for his safety because police say a second suspect is at large.
We currently have one male in police custody. However, we are looking for a second male. Anyone that has any information, anyone that lives in this area that might have seen anything out of the ordinary around 11:30 p.m. last night, contact our homicide investigators.
There are several other locations along this street that are taped off. Different lawns, buildings, ravine entrances as police look for evidence and retrace the steps of the suspects. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Oshawa.
A live look at downtown Toronto, still quite wet after the winter weather travel advisory we were under for most of the day has now finally lifted. The snow that did accumulate on the ground in some parts of the region will not be here for long as any flurries transition to rain through the overnight. Right now, it is sitting at 1 degree out there, and the temperatures are set to rise through the overnight hours. We'll check in with Victa for a full look at just how much rain we're expecting in the coming days and how warm the temperature is set to get just a little later on in the show. But first, we're getting a clearer picture tonight of the man who died in a rooming house fire in the city's East End last week. William Kasha was a shelter worker, and today Talia Ricci sat down with the Director of Housing Support Services at Dixon Hall about the ways Kasha will be remembered.
William was a sweet guy and a man with lived experience in terms of homelessness. He consequently brought to the job a kind of compassion and commitment to the work and to supporting the populations that access our services. And he's worked with Dixon Hall for 20 plus years in a number of our programs supporting marginalized men and women and communities.
And so how did that lived experience that he had translate when you saw him working with people here?
Just a kind of comfort with the populations that we serve and a frankness that was always so appreciated. And I think people felt heard by him. And that's a really important piece of the work that we do here. People respected William and felt a deep kind of affection for him because of his own lived experience and because he was so committed to working with the populations and committed to the agency, right? To work for a place for 20 plus years is a significant commitment.
And when you heard about the circumstances of his death, I mean, he was living in a multi-tenant home. Obviously, there weren't all of the safety measures in place. We don't know for sure with the investigation, but we're hearing preliminary information that there might not have been working smoke alarms. What's your reaction when you hear that?
Well, it saddens me. It saddens me, that people who work for us and work with some of the most vulnerable populations in the city of Toronto are not making enough money to be able to find stable housing. So this is not only an issue that the populations that we serve are faced with, but increasingly we're seeing that across a number of sectors, the healthcare sector, community service sector. All of those things are fundamentally important as we think about how to build the housing that's needed. We need to be thinking about workers and people who are expected to come downtown to do the work and work with these marginalized populations. They need to be paid accordingly.
And how do you think that William's legacy will continue to live on at Dixon Hall and in the community here?
We will have a memorial service in the next couple of days, and I hope that his loss will shine a light on the challenges that frontline workers are faced with, and help us to celebrate that work. We're also looking at opportunities to perhaps name some space after William and to recognize his commitment and work with these men and women that access our services.
That report from our Talia Ricci. Now focusing in on Ontario's school system, and the education minister was at a Toronto public school today announcing a revamp to the way kindergarten kids are taught. Stephen Lecce says the new Back to Basics curriculum will put a heavier focus on the fundamentals of reading. Clara Pasica has more on the changes and how they'll affect students.
How many blocks do you see here?
Here at Glen Park Public School in Toronto, the Education Minister and Eglinton Lawrence's MPP say they have plans to get back to basics with kindergartners, all while retaining the importance of play. The changes, which will be introduced in the classroom in September 2025, are in response to recommendations from the Ontario Human Rights Commission's Right to Read report. They include
more explicit, systematic, direct, province-wide expectations for instruction in foundational reading skills.
moving from what's called the balanced literacy approach to the structured literacy approach. This kindergarten teacher says teachers will now emphasize teaching letters and sounds.
Kids were kind of left up to chance because it was more of a reading is natural, we'll surround them with books, we'll just teach them to use patterns and pictures, and now we're really going to be evidence-based to make sure that nobody's slipping through the cracks, so it will make a difference.
This University of Toronto professor says he's hopeful about the changes, which aim for early detection of learning challenges.
If a student is struggling at the beginning of grade 1 with reading, and we intervene right away, we can actually get 80% of those struggler readers up to be typical readers by the end of the grade 1. However, if we wait to just grade 2, that's only at 50%, and if we wait to grade 3, it's 30%. So there is these critical windows.
Some parents are skeptical, saying it might be a challenge to execute with the available resources.
I think early interventions are tremendously important. But again, it's very difficult for educators to do that when they are facing a class of 26 to 30 students. But when you do the math, no pun intended, are there enough of these services for the number of students that are in our province?
The education minister says there is a resourced plan, with 700 educators training in early reading set to be deployed across the province based on classrooms with the greatest need. Clara Pasica, CBC News, Toronto.
From kindergarten to university, now the federal government's plans to sharply reduce study permits for international students. We are learning tonight it is causing concern at colleges in this province. Publicly funded colleges in Ontario say they've become reliant on the higher tuition fees that foreign students pay. And for that story, let's turn now to senior reporter at Queen's Park, Mike Crawley.
A snowy day on the Seneca College campus in North York. International students now outnumber Canadian students at 10 of Ontario's 24 publicly funded colleges, including here.
The main reason is that the provincial government has encouraged it.
Alex Usher runs a post-secondary education consulting firm.
The way I look at it is that Ontario wants world-class institutions, both universities and colleges. It's just not willing to pay for them. And this has been the easy way to make ends meet.
The number of foreign college and university students coming to Ontario has grown dramatically. Federal figures show some 240,000 study permits granted in each of the last 2 years. Now, Ottawa plans to cut those numbers in half and leave the province to divvy them up among colleges and universities. People in the sector believe Ontario's colleges will feel the pinch most.
This decision, I think, was a little bit, reckless, if I can say that. Roughly a $40 million hit to our budget, and there are other colleges that are in the exact same situation.
Particularly vulnerable are public college programs delivered by private partners. Once the federal government's plan kicks in, foreign students in those programs won't be eligible to work in Canada after they graduate.
That's what's keeping those colleges afloat. You take that money away, there's going to be some real issues in those, and I would say half a dozen colleges across the province.
The latest available stats show more than 110,000 international students enrolled at Ontario colleges, a number that tripled in just 5 years.
early signals from college presidents across the country, but also in Ontario, is that this could lead to program closures, campus closures. It will certainly mean a number of layoffs.
Ontario's Minister for Colleges and Universities declined our request for an interview. She issued a statement that gave no indication how the province will respond to the deep cut in international student numbers. Mike Crowley.
Welcome back. Not immune to the city's affordability challenges, Toronto artists are struggling to get by. Well, tonight, a fun event to tell you about, an underground art tournament where artists put their skills to the test to compete against each other and to entertain, with proceeds helping them being put right back in their pockets. Dale Manukduk has this story.
Welcome to Art Battle Toronto!
Ready, set, go. Art Battle Toronto is back in 2024 for the first time. It's a techno-thumping art tournament held at the Great Hall on Queen West.
It's just everyone's vibe is very energetic.
It's more like creative. You get people that they're not just standing around quiet or boring watching like they're watching a golf tournament.
So how exactly does it work?
Tonight is a 3-round live art competition. So we have 12 artists, 6 in round 1, the other 6 in the second round, and then the top 2 vote getters by audience vote go on to the third and final round. Each round is only 20 minutes, so it's pretty fast-paced.
But creating art in 20 minutes isn't easy, especially with the added pressure of critical eyes. That's why the artists train before hitting the easel.
And I would just put the counter and try to do a 20-minute painting, and it was successful at times, but sometimes it wasn't, so I'm a little nervous.
We are halfway through round 1.
Among the artists tonight is Gratian D'Souza, participating for his 3rd time.
It's just a way for me to have fun, promote myself. I'm very much involved in the Toronto art scene and the community as well, so just a network.
He and other full-time artists say it's difficult to make it in Toronto.
It takes a lot, and you have to put in, it feels like 3 full-time jobs, honestly. We're not just making paintings.
The mayor who joined in on the action says the city has artists' backs through building affordable housing.
There are increasingly less and less spaces, whether it's studio or performing spaces. So it's important to find space for artists to work in and to live in.
The art is auctioned off and often sells for hundreds of dollars. The money is split between the organizers and the artists. Next month, Art Battle Toronto is putting on a history show where participants will recreate great works from the past. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
A risk of fog and freezing rain through the overnight, and more rain is expected tomorrow. Let's get back to Victor Paulo now with the long-range forecast.
Taking a look at the map of North America here, we'd just like to note that Arctic air mass, which we see here, is moving its way slowly but surely back north. And Calgary has areas which have milder winter temperatures like us. 5 degrees in Calgary, which was much different than last week where they had temperatures closer to minus 22. Now, where we're located here in the southeast of Ontario, you can also see a lot of that warming up. Areas such as Windsor had freezing rain. We're receiving rain tomorrow. And all of that is pretty unusual for January. And that's because, as you can see here, a lot of the areas where usually are a lot more blue, even a bit of purple because that's our normal winter colors. Well, it's pretty mild right now. So taking a look at what we're expecting for tonight, it's going to be 1 degree, feeling like -4, and it's going to be quite cloudy. Now, how much rain are we going to be expecting between Wednesday and about midday Thursday? Well, about 14 millimeters. 10 millimeters of those are going to be coming on Wednesday alone. Expecting around the 15 millimeters to be falling for Thursday, but Thursday's rainfall won't be starting till about after supper. Now, here's what we're looking for snowfall amounts. Not that much snow expected here in the GTA between around now and the end of the show. Maybe another centimeter, maybe another 2 might fall, but nothing more right around 2 o'clock in the morning, as it's going to turn over to being more of a foggy, cloudy night. Now, when it comes towards your rainfall, here's what it's going to look like. As I mentioned, for Wednesday, it's going to be starting around your commute home, and your Thursday is going to be pretty cloudy. The reason your Thursday is going to be cloudy because we're going to be in between 2 different rainfall systems. As you see, here's the first one for Wednesday that brings 10 millimeters, and the second one that comes by on Thursday, as we'll be coming around after supper, and here's about 15 millimeters that'll be coming with it. Now, looking at your Wednesday and Thursday, we have precipitation coming our way, a bit of a break with some sunshine on Friday, a cloudy Saturday, Sunday, but the return of that sun on Monday. But altogether, we are still in the middle of quite the mild winter. Stay dry, Toronto, and have a good night. Over to you, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Victor. Here's something for Toronto FC fans to celebrate tonight. Toronto's Jonathan Osorio was just named team captain for this upcoming season. Osorio becomes the 8th captain in Toronto FC history, and he takes over for Michael Bradley, who retired last year. The 31-year-old midfielder will enter his 12th season with the Reds. He played 280 MLS games, scoring 46 goals. TFC won the MLS Cup in 2017, but has recently struggled. The new season begins on February 25th against FC Cincinnati. Ending tonight with a happy milestone at Holland Bloorview Rehab Hospital in honor of its 125th anniversary. The children's facility kicked off a year-long celebration today.
It's really exciting here at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital as we kick off celebrations that will culminate in our 125th birthday party. You can imagine how much a hospital caring for children with disabilities has changed since 1899, when a group of dedicated women came together to form what they called the Home for Incurable Children.
At first, that small care home helped 15 children. Fast forward 125 years, and the rehab hospital is now the largest of its kind in the country, serving more than 9,000 families. Part of today's celebration was about applauding the success story of a former patient. Emily Chan spent nearly 6 years of her life at Holland Bloorview. Nearly 30 years later, she now works there as a social worker.
Now working on the same unit that I lived on when I grew up. So again, I'm super proud, super lucky to work alongside my almost like second family.
Chan was one of the first medically complex babies to be admitted to Holland Bloorview back in 1997. And that's it for us tonight. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. We'll see you then.